In-game communications. Let me start with a brief discussion of why communications are so important in line of contact. Line of contact is entirely team-based, and no single player can expect to be effective or live very long if they run off on their own and don't coordinate with teammates. The nature of the game promotes and relies upon overall team awareness of their positions, roles, and tactics. For this very reason, any player wanting to play line of contact is expected to have a reliable Xbox communicator. Not having a communicator will typically mean you don't get to play, and people will not want you on their team. This might seem harsh, but the handicap of having a non-communicator equipped player on a team is significant. So for some reason, in-game communication for line of contact continues to be a point of confusion for many players, even some of the more experienced. Let's start with hardware setup. The Steel Battalion controller does not have a port on it for the Xbox communicator. Instead, the communicator is plugged into a standard Xbox controller, which itself is plugged into another controller port on the Xbox console. The standard Xbox controller is also used for friends list and live control features, which I'll discuss briefly later on. That's really it for hardware setup, but I'll make mention here that any off-brand or cheap headsets are often very poor quality and cause a lot of feedback and background noise in-game. Needless to say, this is very annoying, so do yourself a favor and a favor for everyone else and get something proper. On to communications controls. Similar to the original game, communications with the line of contact use the tuner dial and the 5 communication buttons on the center block. The position of the tuner dial dictates which teammate you are communicating with, and the buttons are used to open, close, and switch communications. Each communication function has a corresponding display or effect within the cockpit display on screen. The location of the communication indicators varies slightly by VT generation and type, but typically they are located to the right side of the cockpit. Starting at the 9 o'clock position and going clockwise, each tick on the tuner dial represents a pilot slot. The first slot at the 9 o'clock position corresponds to the pilot in position 1 of the session sortie list. If you are currently pilot 1 and want to communicate with pilot 3, you would turn the tuner dial to the 11 o'clock position as follows. To open communications with a player, you press communication button 1. When communications are opened, the pilot avatar and details are displayed on a sub-monitor at the bottom of the cockpit. To close active communications, press communication button 2. If you are communicating with one player and another player attempts to contact you, but your tuner dial is not set to their position, communication button 3 will flash and a tone will sound. If communication button 3 is pressed at this time, communications will automatically be switched to the incoming request. Communication buttons 4 and 5 are actually used to control the in-cockpit boombox. Button 4 pauses and restarts the currently playing track, and button 5 skips to the next track. If you switch the tuner dial and press communication button 1 to communicate with someone, and you hear a short beep, it means that there is no one available to receive your request. There are a few reasons this might happen. 1. You might have the tuner dial set to your channel, and you can't communicate with yourself. 2. There might be no one on the selected channel. Typically there will not be a pilot in position 5, the 1 o'clock tuner dial position. 3. A pilot may have been dropped from the game session or run out of VTs, resulting in their having been withdrawn from the mission. There is no global chat channel in Conquest mode for line of contact. Battle Royale, another game mode not often played, allows all players to communicate simultaneously with one another if they are within 2,000 meters of one another.